Going live on YouTube now. What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Joe Hitagwa. I'm a Sierra Leonean American living here in Accra, Ghana. And if you want to know how $1 billion from the World Bank is being allocated to Sierra Leone, then this is the video for you. Are live. All right, so now we are live on many platforms. We're live on Twitter, we're live on Instagram, we're live on YouTube, we are live on Twitch, and we are live on Facebook. So we're live across a number of different platforms. Oh, we're also live on LinkedIn as well. So if you're joining, thanks for joining. If those of you on Instagram mentioned that you can hear me, if you do want to catch what I'm putting up on the screen, I'll be presenting today. If you're on Instagram, what you need to do is head over to YouTube. So what you can do is you could just go to my profile on Instagram, click the link there. It'll take you to the YouTube channel. There you can click on the link to the live and you can join the live. So in terms of folks who have joined, we have Manelik here. Code Blue says what's up, and iTuber said it's an interesting topic. So again, if you guys want to see how over $1 billion was spent in Sierra Leone, this is definitely the live that you want to be on. We got a lot to talk about today. We are starting pretty late today. There's been some technical difficulties. I went live yesterday, same issues. So if you guys are joining from Instagram, you can head over to YouTube and watch the live from there. And I'll be presenting on my screen. So all you have to do is just click on the link in my description there. I didn't pin a link today. It has been quite the day, or the last 2 days. That's a conversation for another time when I go live again on a more personal topic. But today we are going to talk about the $1 billion that was allocated to Sierra Leone from the World Bank and how it was spent. A lot of people have questions about how investments are made in Sierra Leone, how much has been invested. And today we're going to talk about that in detail. We're going to talk about the World Bank, who they are and what they are, how they came up with what they're going to focus on, what the challenges they saw in Sierra Leone. And then we'll talk about exactly how they allocated those funds to Sierra Leone. So there's a lot to talk about today, and we're going to get through all of it. Now on YouTube, can you guys let me know that you can hear me on YouTube? I know that you guys can hear me on Instagram. Can you guys hear me on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook? Can you guys hear me? Give me a thumbs up so I know you guys can hear me, so we can get started on this. In the meantime, I'll do a little bit of an introduction, especially for those who are joining from Instagram. Again, my name is Joannis. Some people call me Joe. My last name is Hitagwa. I'm a Sierra Leonean American. I live in Accra, Ghana. I go back and forth between Accra, Ghana and Sierra Leone. I'm building a house in Sierra Leone. I have some land there as well. And my goal is to give you guys the insight into what is happening here on the continent, whether it is through my own personal experience and my journey, through other entrepreneurs who are here on the continent, those who have moved from the diaspora to the continent, or those who are, born and raised here. So we're going to give you like kind of both sides of the story, what their lives are like, what their businesses are like, the challenges, the pluses, what it's like to invest here on the continent, and then also give you guys insight into what's happening in the investment community and their investments on the continent of Africa. So a couple of weeks back, we did a live about the tech investments that happened on the continent of Africa. Over $5 billion went into tech investments throughout the year 2022. The only continent that saw an increase in tech investments year over year. Everyone else saw a sharp decline. And so we talked about that. And there were some questions about Sierra Leone in particular, right? What exactly was the investment amounts that went into Sierra Leone, and what did it go into? And it's very difficult to find how much money was invested in Sierra Leone in terms of businesses and startups because it's such a small amount. However, the World Bank has invested quite a bit of money in Sierra Leone. And so that is what we're going to talk about today. So again, if you guys are joining from YouTube, definitely let me know if you can hear me. Give me a thumbs up so I know that you can hear me. Again, apologies for the late start today. It has been a whirlwind of a day today. It was a very eventful day. So yeah, we're gonna jump right into it. Okay, cool. So I'm not going to do the normal introduction because I want to get straight to the information that you guys are here for. And so I'm going to start sharing my screen. Again, if you guys are watching on Instagram and you want to see what I'm sharing on my screen, I'm going to shoot a link right now to myself. Um, and I'm going to share that link with you all. And what I'll do is, so I'm going to share the link with you all on Instagram, and then you guys can join on the YouTube to watch live. So give me one moment to just shoot it over to myself. So I'm going to jump off the Instagram live really quickly. Just stay right there, and then the link will be pinned in the comments. So I'll be right back with that link. And those of you guys are watching on YouTube, just stay tuned. We're about to jump into it in a second. I'm just making sure that those people who are following along from other platforms can see what's on the screen. So I want to share with them the YouTube link here. So I'm reconnecting to my Instagram live. The video was paused and now it's reconnecting, of course, because that is how things work. And while I do that, I haven't heard from you guys on whether or not you can hear me on YouTube. So, okay, Mashonda E says you can hear me. Cool. Okay, cool. My Instagram live is going through some major challenges, so I'm gonna have to exit out of it and start over again. So let me go back to Instagram and go live again. And this time I will go live with the link for YouTube. So give me a second, guys. It's been one of those days with technical difficulties and challenges just connecting to the internet. I've had intermittent internet connectivity today, and there's just been a really aggressively challenging day today, to say the least. So, okay, cool. We are live on Instagram once again. And so I'm gonna share the link with everyone to join in the live. All right, cool. So as people join on Instagram, it looks like you guys can hear me. So Mamas of the Earth said you can hear me. Marcel Carl says, okay. Marcel says, get to the point. So I got you, Marcel. I'm getting to the point. Don't worry. It's just I had to get everything going to get everybody on the live because it's been a very challenging day. All right, cool. So let's get into it. Guys, so the question has been how much investment went into Sierra Leone and how was it spent, right? These are questions that people have been asking, and I am going to give you the answers. So let's do this. Let me go ahead and share my screen so you guys can see what I will be presenting. Again, if you're joining on the Instagram live, there's a link that's pinned there in the description. You can click on that link and that will take you to the YouTube live so that you can see what's on my screen. All right, so let's do the entire screen. And here we go. All right, cool. So I'm sure you guys can see my screen, so let's get right into it. So how's the World Bank money spent? But before we get into that, let's talk about who the World Bank is, because I'm not sure everyone is familiar with the World Bank. I hear a lot of controversy surrounding the World Bank in terms of conspiracy theories that I hear about online, especially operating the Authentic African Instagram page. There are a number of different people who post different things about large institutions that are investing on the continent. People tend to be skeptical, but at this point, what we do know is how much money was invested or is earmarked to be invested. And we could talk a little bit about what the World Bank talks about in terms of their priorities. So first of all, the World Bank is an international financial institution that provides loans and grants to governments of what are considered low and middle income countries for the purpose of purchasing capital projects. So basically taking these grants and loans and doing developmental projects for the country. They have 4 key priorities. So food security, food insecurity is the challenge that they're trying to solve. Food security is defined when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. So that is their definition of food security. Obviously, they're working with countries that are considered low income or middle income to help them with food insecurity, right? Also, one of their other key priorities is working on climate change. Climate change, poverty, and inequality are the defining issues of our age, according to the World Bank Group. And they consider themselves the biggest multilateral funder of climate investments in developing countries. So the third of their key priorities is International Development Association, which is part of the World Bank that helps world's poorest countries. And we'll talk about what that looks like and what they're doing. And then lastly, they have this program called World Bank Data. So if you remember when I talked about the challenges doing business in Sierra Leone, I referenced the World Bank data. So if you want to go back and watch that, why most businesses fail in Sierra Leone, most of what I talked about was either my direct interactions with business owners and my communications with them, but then also I took facts on the ground and from the evaluations done by the World Bank and others. And so a lot of that came from World Bank data. So let me just check in with the YouTube and make sure everyone is clear and good. Okay. So no questions so far. Makes a lot of sense. Cool. If you're just joining on Instagram Live, we are talking about the over $1 billion earmarked for Sierra Leone, what it's for, and how it's been allocated so far. We got a lot to go over today, so I'm just going to be presenting on screen. So if you're following from Instagram, you can click on that link in the description. That'll take you to the YouTube Live so you can see what I'm saying on screen. All right. So let's get back to the presentation. All right. So that's a little bit about the World Bank. You guys get an idea who they are. So as I mentioned, over $1 billion has been earmarked for 2020, 2021 through 2026. And so far of the 1 billion, 470 million has already been given. And that's as of October of 2022. So quite a substantial amount of money has already been given. So today we're going to talk about where that money has gone, right? But before we do, I do want to just give you guys a little bit more context as to why they have classified Sierra Leone as a low income or middle income country and how they've determined what they're going to focus on. Because I think that context is really helpful. So this is their evaluation. They did an evaluation, and this is, in their eyes, the current state of Sierra Leone. So the first things first, here's the macroeconomic context. Sierra Leone's sustained economic growth has been constrained by three main things. The first is exposure to multidimensional exogenous shocks, meaning things that happen in many different ways outside of what's happening in Sierra Leone, but still are affecting Sierra Leone, right? So things that are happening economically around the world, things that are happening in terms of epidemics around the world, or things that has nothing to do with what Sierra Leone can do anything about. And then climatic or climate-related issues. They've also cited as number two, fragile institutions, meaning in terms of government and a number of other institutions that you find in many countries, right? They consider them, quote unquote, fragile. And so that is another challenge that they see as part of the macroeconomic context. And third, limited fiscal space. So what do they mean? Agricultural and mining account for 2/3 of all economic output. You know how they say don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Or the idea of diversifying your interests, right? Like if you work in sales, right, and you have one client that's responsible for 2/3 of your goal, what happens if that client goes away? What happens to you as a salesperson? That's the same way they look at countries, right? In terms of how diverse are the different areas of economic output. And 2/3 of Sierra Leone's economic output is in two areas, agriculture and mining. Since the 2010s, the economy has been affected by back-to-back crises. So short-lived recoveries that were happening in between, but because of these crises, you had recoveries and then setbacks, right? So in 2014 to 2016, you had Ebola. There was the collapse of global commodities prices. in terms of that happened in 2015 and 2016. That happened outside of Sierra Leone. There was a mudslide that happened in Sierra Leone, actually more Regent than Freetown, but that happened in 2017. I think about 1,000 people lost their lives in that mudslide, if I'm not mistaken, if I have the numbers correctly. Obviously, the global sickness of 2020 and kind of has been ongoing, has been one of the other challenges. And then, of course, the implications of what's going on in the Ukraine right now, which started in March of 2022. Those are all impacting Sierra Leone. And these are all things that are outside of kind of the general, here are the things we're doing to fix our country or to move our country in the right direction, right? These are things that are just unforeseen challenges that you can deal with, right? A mudslide, how can you be able to, to foresee that a mudslide is happening, or pandemics and epidemics, right? These kinds of things are things that are outside the realm of what you can naturally prepare for a country the size of Sierra Leone. And then, of course, if there are conflicts happening in other parts of the world that have impacts on fuel prices, then, of course, you as a country, even halfway across the world, will have been impacted by that. Okay, cool. So those are the challenges as they see them. Okay. So now here what they're saying are the recent developments. These are their evaluation of the recent developments. So during 2021, the economy grew 4.1%, and that was supported by recovery in agriculture, mining, and private consumption demand. And this was after the initial global sickness had happened, right? In 2022, headline inflation accelerated. So it went from an economic recovery of 4.1% because of what happened in 2021. So 2022 saw a 4.1% increase and recovery, but then inflation hit, and that increased during 2022. And it actually accelerated to a decade high 30% year on year, compared to an average 12% during 2021. So the average inflation was 30% in 2022 versus the average inflation was 12% in 2021. And I can tell you, as someone who's building a house in Sierra Leone, I was given quotes for certain things, hot water heaters, cement, things like that. A year ago, some of it has even doubled in pricing today. Sierra Leone is not the only one affected by inflation. As you all know, many countries around the world have been affected by inflation, but Sierra Leone, being considered a country that is low income to middle income, obviously the impacts are more drastic and are just exacerbated by those challenges. So outside of that, high food and fuel inflation has had a significant social impact. So according to the World Food Program in 2022, about 73% of Sierra Leoneans are food insecure. What does food insecure mean? That means that you are not sure when your next meal is coming from. 73% of Sierra Leone, based on these studies that World Bank has done, are food insecure. So using so from 2017, the poverty rate has estimated to increase during the global sickness, and other fiscal pressures have intensified. So so many challenges came from that global sickness, and we're not going to go too deep into that, but as you can tell, there were some challenges there. And so let's get into the outlook. So with those challenges, they decided to say, okay, what do we think is going to happen in terms of the recovery from all of these different things, as they've kind of looked at the historical recoveries that have happened in between all of these different challenges that Sierra Leone has encountered. So what they're saying is that a nascent economic recovery was disrupted in 2022. As I said, 2021, you saw a 4.1% increase, but of course that dropped in 2022. So terms of trade shock, which onset obviously what happened in the Ukraine, the rise in global food and fuel prices, that ended up being challenges. Even though Sierra Leone has some key exports, they weren't able to offset those challenges with pricing from their imports and the things they have in country. The increase in fuel prices also resulted in power outage, right? Power outages at a higher level. GDP growth is now projected at 3.6%. For 2022, that was down 5%, which was projected at the end of 2021. But that growth will be supported by two main things. One is the resumption of iron ore mining in two different regions in Sierra Leone for the first time since the onset of the epidemic, Ebola. And then also part two is a gradual recovery in consumption demand. So supply chain disruptions and inflationary pressures have caused, that are caused by what's happening in Ukraine are dampening investments and the slow recovery in private consumption, prolonging the overall economic recovery. So over the medium term, they expect that GDP growth will average about 4%, but remain below the long-term average of 4.3%. Because of all these shocks that are happening in the environment. So this is how they look at the different business sectors and what's happening. And this is their outlook of what is going to happen in Sierra Leone in the coming months. So let's talk about some of the risks and challenges affecting Sierra Leone today. So of course, in accelerating inflation and intensifying fiscal pressures pose significant risks to the medium-term economic outlook. Risks of social instability have also risen, as witnessed during the violent riots of 2022 in August. If you guys might remember, we did a live about this. I did this with Masa and Kenya last year in August, where 27 people lost their lives, including security personnel and law enforcement. I think about 6 law enforcement or security personnel lost their lives, and 21 civilians lost their lives during those riots or protests. I kind of put the two words together. Those riots or protests, however you decide to define them, depending on which side you're coming from. When that happened, that's what led to 27 people, unfortunately, losing their lives. Obviously, there's also been, other global spillovers from what's happening in Ukraine, as we've talked about before. And there's discontent and uncertainties associated with the upcoming general elections, because there are presidential elections this coming year in 2023. So we'll talk about that now. So here's the political context, right? Sierra Leone is going to hold its presidential, parliamentary, and local council elections on June 24th of this year. So the Electoral Commission announced that the upcoming elections will be conducted under what they're calling the District Block Proportional Representation, or PR. This is a system that has been opposed to the constituency-based first past the post system that was been used since 2007. So it's a new process. We'll go through that when we talk about the next election in another live. We'll talk about the Sierra Leone election the way we did talk about the Nigerian election. So we'll get into the details of this later, but just know there are some changes this time around. And so the main opposition, the APC, or the All People's Congress, has challenged the legality of the PR system in court, and the laying of constitutional instruments on November 23rd of last year. And that's what led to a violent confrontation between the opposition and the ruling party members in parliament. So there was actually physical altercation between opposition and the ruling party members in parliament last year, November 23rd, about this particular topic. Again, when we go into the all of the candidates and what their platforms are and what they're running on, we will talk a little bit more about that, and we'll get into the details of what happened there. We can even show some footage if you guys would like to see. But today I want to just stick to this, but I just want to make sure that it's clear. Here are some of the challenges that we're seeing. So the ruling party, Sierra Leone People's Party, SLPP, of course, it has endorsed the current president for a second term. The main opposition, the APC, also has a new potential flag bearer, and also the NGC has a new flag bearer. We'll talk about who they are and what their platforms are at a later date. Before I move on, let's see if there are any other questions, comments, or concerns. It looks like no new questions. All right, so here's how we'll get into the strategy, right? So here was how they said, okay, so we've gone through one, who's the World Bank? Two, uh, we've gone through what the way they see Sierra Leone, the challenges so far, and then we've gone through the outlook and where they think is happening and what's going on politically. So now we're going to get to the strategy, right? How do they plan to improve Sierra Leone? What programs are they putting into place? And then we'll talk about the money. So they have what they call the Country Partnership Framework. So this was approved in May of 2020, and it basically aligned with the government's National Development Plan, which emphasizes human capital development and economic diversification. So remember, we talked about the fact that you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. 2/3 of Sierra Leone's economic output is specifically in agriculture and mining, right? So one of the goals with this country partnership framework is to do some economic diversification. And so it has three main focus areas. Number one, sustainable growth and accountable governance. So governance, sorry. So meaning, obviously, as you grow, continue to sustain that growth. Because as I mentioned, with every new challenge, we grow, then we have a setback. We grow, and then we have a setback, right? And so ideally, they find a way to keep sustainable growth. Accountable governance, what they're meaning here is ensuring that taxed income and other funding that goes to government organizations do get deployed properly across the sectors that they're meant to be deployed. Human capital acceleration for inclusive growth, meaning that could be everywhere from entrepreneurship to education, right? Economic diversification and competitiveness with resilience in three cost-cutting themes: governance, gender, and technology. So obviously ensuring that governance and the programs that the government has are diverse, obviously gender diversity as well. And obviously technology, increasing the technology sector in Sierra Leone. That's everything from technical literacy to investments in companies. Now, the World Bank portfolio stands at $1.021 billion, covering 21 national projects with an amount of $842.42 million, 4 regional projects at $179.57, and trust funds worth $50 million. The energy sector constitutes the largest share of the portfolio, 16%, followed by health, 12.7%, urban resilient and land, 8.9%, and social protection and jobs, 8.5%. So that is kind of the overarching theme for how they plan to spend the money. And we'll talk about more specifically some of the different programs that money has gone to. Again, if you guys are joining us from Instagram, we are talking about how over $1 billion of funding has gone to Sierra Leone in terms of loans and grants. And we're going to talk about where it's actually going. So if you're joining from Instagram, there is a pinned link there in the description where you can join the YouTube live and you can follow along with the presentation as we go along. Okay, moving on to more of the strategy. So there are 2 other areas in which the World Bank is adding to the strategy, right? So they have the International Finance Corporation and they have the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. So the IFC basically has decided 3 critical areas to support Sierra Leone's key sectors. So these focus areas are agribusiness, energy, and mining. Each of these sectors will also benefit from the increased interventions to improve access to finance. That is super important, right? Many businesses are capital intensive and they do require outside financing, right? Any small business ideally could get some additional funding, and also large scale businesses that want to scale even more also could require some additional funding. So the IFC country strategy also highlights the increasing role of the digital economy in improving efficiencies and productivity, and is fully aligned with the World Bank Country Partnership Framework. So the IFC is a portion of the World Bank, and they are working along with the World Bank to obviously work on these key sectors. Then there's the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, which is also associated with the World Bank. And this recognizes the heightened perception of political risk and the prevailing fragilities alongside increased interest in foreign investments in the country. What does that mean? Because there are some perceived, let's say, challenges with political risk, that means that some folks might be hesitant to invest, right? And that just makes sense, right? You want to be sure you know where your money is going, and also you want to be sure that there is political stability if you invest your money, right? So the MIGA continues to actively explore opportunities to support private investment in Sierra Leone, especially in the power, telecoms, and commercial agriculture sectors, supporting independent power projects and off-grid power solutions. So it aims to utilize the IDA private sector window and any other transactions that may come to fruition. So ideally, the MIGA is focused on power, phone companies, and agriculture, and trying to focus on not the main power companies, but off the grid ideas and independent power projects. So that could be solar companies, that could be wind companies, that could be water companies, right? All different kinds of companies that are focused on bringing these solutions to the market, and MIGA is focused on those areas. Okay. So now let's get into where the money's actually gone so far. So I'm going to walk you through where the money's gone so far so you are aware of where it's gone and how it's been spent. So in response to the global sickness, as I've been calling it, because as you guys know, YouTube has a way of having challenges with people discussing it with its proper terminology. So we'll just say the global sickness. $39.65 million in support has been given to Streamline through the Emergency Preparedness and Response Project. So, you know, the vaccination project and others. So the government administered 4 million doses of the shot, 68% of the currently available shots, and 37.4% of the population have gone through the process of fully taking the number of shots necessary to be considered fully, you know, fully up to date with the number of shots you're supposed to have taken within that group. Okay, health systems development and system support. That is 15.5 million. So that was approved back in 2016, immediately following, or at least the program was immediately following that initial outbreak of Ebola, and it was expected to close at the end of last year. But it was meant to significantly improve access to quality essential health services and enhance the national emergency response capacity, meaning Sierra Leone's version of 911, right? So 79% of pregnant women were attended to 4 or more times by health personnel during their visits. I guess it's like prenatal care visits, and skilled personnel attended to 87% of births. The percentage of children fully immunized increased to 75%, increasing the 60% project end target. So there's a lot here. We're not going to go through all of them. There was also a free education project that aimed to improve management of education systems, teaching practices, and learning conditions. Primary and secondary education. The project was co-financed through a grant of 15.9 million. They were focusing on areas like education sector, planning and budgeting, school quality assurance, school planning, education data management, annual school census, a number of different programs. A total of 1.8. So, okay. Also, the project did build an additional 500 furnished classrooms by the end of that project. A total of 1.8 million students, 56,000 teachers, and school management committee members of 7,900 primary and secondary schools had all benefited from the project, according to the World Bank. Let me see if there are any questions, comments so far. Can you guys hear me on YouTube? It says no sound, which is not ideal. Or Instagram. Can you guys hear me on Instagram? Give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear me on Instagram. Okay, cool. Now, there's also the Global Partnership for Education Fund, additional financing for the global sickness. So there was 6.8 million that went to that. This added to the free education project to support the government's education emergency response and reduce learning losses. The main approach is to keep students safe and minimize learning losses. So the project also supported communication and sensitization campaigns to prevent the spread, keeping girls engaged in learning and out of pregnancy, and getting children back to school. The project helped the government launch a national policy on radical inclusion for all children in Sierra Leone, ensuring that young girls are able to go to class as well as their male counterparts. There was 20 million that went to a skills development project. This project supported increased access to demand-led skills training. A total of 18,000 students were benefiting according to the World Bank, out of which 7,500 are currently enrolled and 10,000 have completed training as of August 2022. So the project is supporting the government in building demand-led skills development system through multiple activities. Some other programs as well. Social safety net program of 47 million also was supporting the government's flagship social safety net program, SSNP, with 47 million. The program benefited 109,000 what they considered extremely poor households, reaching an estimated 654,000 individuals, which means there's an average of about 6 people per household. And they did cash transfers, including beneficiaries covered under the Ebola period. 74% of beneficiaries were women. They also had a productive social safety net for youth employment. That project was $40 million. So it became effective in June of 2022. The aim was to improve access to social safety nets and income generating opportunities for targeted beneficiaries. It's supposed to scale up Social Security cash transfers to what they consider the extremely poor, while providing a package of services to help them establish a foundation for income generation. For the youth, the project is supposed to support sustainable and green labor intensive public works programs, support for youth-led entrepreneurship, and an information platform for youth employment. The energy sector saw quite a substantial amount of investment. $207.65 million went to the energy sector. And it is important and needed because Sierra Leone, as you may know, deals with blackouts on a regular basis for extended periods of time. And so energy investment is hugely vital to just being able to be at a place where you have ongoing light and internet, and access to electricity. So they were basically committed to a long-term engagement that stepped up its support to energy with an integrated strategy focusing on ensuring regional energy trade with ECOWAS countries, meaning like Ghana, Nigeria, Guinea, Liberia, right? Working on energy trade with those countries, ambitious targets for grid and off-grid energy access, turnaround for energy sector utilities to enable private sector investment in power generation. They supported 207 million, obviously, as I said, and it was focusing on regional integration for security of supply, financial turnaround, and government reforms in the utility sector and energy access in rural areas. There's this smallholder commercialization and agribusiness development project. 70 million went to that. The project is facilitated to increase in marketed volumes by producer organizations and agribusinesses, with the targets being surpassed. 157% target reached for rice, 123% for cocoa, 108 for maize or corn, 113 for birds, and 120% above or 100%, 20% of goal for eggs. So except for palm oil, which actually had 93% of its target, all other targets were surpassed. The number of outgrowers linked to project-supported agribusiness had increased to 3,633 in 2017 to 59,424 by the end of October 2022. And the volume of crops sold to agribusinesses by outgrowers has exceeded 98,000 metric tons. So a ton of really good outcomes came from doing this smallholder commercialization in agriculture's development project. So that is where the money went. Quite a substantial amount of money. As I said, 400 million or so has already been allocated. More than 1 billion is planned to be allocated between now and 2026. Well, between early 2021 and 2026. So there's another a little over 590 or so million dollars still left to be, sorry, 690 so million dollars left to be allocated to Sierra Leone from the World Bank. So it's quite a substantial amount. So those questions, I hope that answers the question, right? And at least in terms of some of the investments that went into the continent. People have been asking, who is investing in Sierra Leone and how much? Now you know, at the very least, what the World Bank did. Any questions, comments, or concerns? We are at about 41 minutes today. This has been a jam-packed session. I wanted to make sure I got you all of that information from the World Bank. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns before we draw this live to a close? I did see someone mention they are coming to Ghana, for instance. Today we're focused on Sierra Leone, but we can definitely talk about what's going on in Ghana. I will end the call by saying this. We do need more private sector investments in Sierra Leone. And I think it's really important to understand that what we describe today can seem like challenges, but they're also opportunities. You know, everywhere where you see that there are, we're underserving in those communities, there are opportunities, one, for wealth creation, right? If you could figure out how to solve those challenges, and two, to do well for the country as well. So you really can benefit in two ways. The Real Exposure Show says, this was great. That was great. Thank you. I'm glad you found it to be helpful. Anybody else have any other comments or concerns before we bring this to a close? By the way, what I will say is if you know anybody who has been asking you, what kind of investments are happening in Sierra Leone? What are they investing in? How much have they invested? You can send them this live so they get a pretty good idea of what's happening. I think that there are a lot of questions about how much money goes into Sierra Leone and how it's spent. And you can see not only how it was spent, but you can also see the impact of that spend, right? We went through a number of the different programs and you saw them hitting their goals in specific areas. You saw the number of people that were directly impacted by some of the education initiatives. You saw for their goals around the response to the global sickness and how that was handled, right? Those things are all things that you saw them impact with the World Bank funding. So the Real Exposure Show says Sierra Leone on the come up. It sure is, for sure. Shonda E says, I had no idea the food insecurity issue was so bad. There has to be a way that we can help in the US. Yeah, so and the Real Exposure Show said, yes, it's 73% is what the World Bank actually said. So yeah, over 70% of people in Sierra Leone are considered food insecure. But yeah, there has to be a way we can help from the US. There is a way. I think it's always going to be through the private sector and investing in small businesses. Because here's the thing. I've now lived for a significant part of my life in 2 major countries, and I have visited almost 30 countries around the world. And everywhere I go, people are so reliant on the government. Everywhere I've gone, people are relying on the government. And even myself, I consider myself a liberal. I do believe that government is important, but government moves slow, intentionally, and also anywhere around the world, you find that because much of their time is spent rerunning for office, there's really a small amount of time, small windows where they can actually implement any strategies. And a lot of times you have opposing parties in areas of parliament where they may purposefully make it difficult for you to execute on some of your ideas, regardless of which party we're talking about or which country we're talking about. It just happens that way. So the best way that we can support these countries, specifically Sierra Leone, is through the private sector. And not only can you support and help with the growth through the private sector, but you can also generate wealth that way. And so what do I mean? I mean, investing in companies, because these companies can get people jobs and they can pay people fair wages. And if these companies can get people jobs and pay people fair wages, those people can take care of their families. And if they can take care of their families, you could start to reduce some of the food insecurity. You could start to increase the likelihood of class participation and even going to class in the first place. You know, how difficult do you think it might be to focus in class if you don't know when you get home you're going to eat, if you're hungry because you haven't eaten that morning, right? Are you even going to go to school? If you go to school, can you really focus, right? So there's so many places where if you just start investing in companies, which is why I came to the continent of Africa in the first place, where we can potentially see these things start to turn around. The Real Exposure Show says, wow, I'm loving learning about Africa. Yeah, that's the goal of this channel, right? That is the goal of this channel and this platform, Authentic Africa, Authentic African as a whole. Is my goal is to teach and to share the information as I learn and as I'm living here, because most of what I've learned about the continent of Africa has come in the last 2 years, me living here on the continent. It's really hard to find this kind of information if you're living your everyday life in the States. And myself, I didn't know any of the stuff. I didn't know a quarter of the stuff that I'm seeing and that I'm learning now. So I definitely would say being on the continent has taught me a lot. I want to learn more about investing is what the Real Exposure Show says. Yes, so we'll do plenty more topics on investing. If you want to know what industries and sectors were invested in the most on the continent of Africa in 2022, go back to the live I did on $5 billion invested in the continent of Africa. I went through what sectors the investments went in. This is tech investment, by the way. I'm going to be doing in the next week or so, or maybe the following week, I'm going to do a live on investments in outside of tech. So those are going to be more natural resources, energy efficient and outside of energy efficient natural resources, and mining and things like that. So we'll talk about that. The Real Exposure Show says, great job, King. Thank you. I'm glad you found this helpful. Miss Shonda E says, good point, Joe. Thanks for breaking it down. Absolutely. The Real Exposure Show said they will go back and watch the other live. Yeah, definitely watch that. You'll get a really good understanding of where that money went. And then in either next week or the following week, as I mentioned, we'll talk about non-tech investments, which is a whole nother section of the economy that got a significant amount of investments last year. And I'm going to be sure to break that down for you in what sectors, who were the investors, in terms of country governments, in terms of companies. All of that is coming in the coming weeks. Those of you who are just joining the YouTube live, thank you for joining. I'm glad that you are joining. You want to make sure you go back and watch this, because I went into detail as to how this $1 billion has been earmarked, how the 470 million of it has already been spent, and not only where it was spent, but the impact of that spend, right? Who actually benefited from that spend. So make sure you go back and watch this live from the beginning so you get a full understanding of how that money was spent. So GRNS says, next month will be my first trip to Sierra Leone. I'm excited. Nice. You'll love it. Just make sure you watch my video, 10 things you need to know before coming to Sierra Leone, and then watch the 10 things that shocked me about Sierra Leone. I want to just ensure that you watch those 2 videos before you travel to Sierra Leone, so you can be aware of what to expect when you get there and you can come prepared. For those of you who are watching that are also interested in traveling to Sierra Leone or moving to Sierra Leone, this year, Beyond everything else I've told you guys I'll be working on over the last couple of months, I am working on the ultimate guide to moving to Sierra Leone. So we're going to talk about how to get your driver's license. We're going to talk about how to get your dual citizenship. We're going to talk about what areas of town to live in and how to buy real estate. We're going to talk about how to set yourself up to start a business. We're going to talk about how to open a bank account. All of that is going to be done as part of the ultimate guide to moving to Sierra Leone. I'm also putting together travel guides. So if you're just planning to travel, you'll know, okay, here are the things I need. And then you'll have links to the products where you can buy them, whether it's on Amazon or on the Authentic African site. But I want to make sure that I give you guys access to what's going to be necessary to make a smooth trip when you visit. And then also, if you decide to move, what you can expect. And everything I know about moving to Sierra Leone and Ghana comes from not only my own personal experience, because I myself am a single man. So my experience is different from single women. And so I have a ton of information and insight that I've gotten from them. And then also people who've moved with families, single mothers and families as well. And what it has been like for them to transition to a move to specifically Sierra Leone and Ghana. And I'm putting ultimate guides for how to move to Sierra Leone and ultimate guide for moving to Ghana, as well as travel guides for Ghana and Sierra Leone. I'll be doing travel guides for other countries as well, but those are going to be coming later on in the year. The Real Exposure Show says, I want to know about yellow fever. I don't want that. Yeah, so here's the thing. In order to go to Sierra Leone, you are required to have the yellow fever jab. You are. It's a requirement. So you're not going to be able to go to Sierra Leone unless you get it. Now, they have stated, and it depends on when you got it, the yellow fever jab used to be a 10-year jab. Now the new ones are for life. And so just know that you may not have to get it again. If you've already gotten it, it might actually cover you for that. If you haven't gotten it, you do have to get it. I will tell you, I myself did obviously have to get it. I got it back in 2010 when I was first going to Sierra Leone as an adult. So it is going to be a requirement. And they will ask you at the airport. I'm not even sure you can get on a flight from the States to Sierra Leone without it, but I'm pretty sure you cannot enter the country when you get to customs without it. They ask you definitely at customs when you get to Sierra Leone if you have it. And so you just want to make sure you do go through the process of getting it. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts before we bring this to an end? I meant to end this 10 minutes ago, but you guys have had some really good comments and questions and thoughts. So I'm more than happy to stay on a little bit longer to answer your questions if you have more. And those of you who are joining from Instagram Live, you can click on the link in the description to watch the replay of the live that I did, for sure. The Real Exposure Show is asking if you can get an exemption form. I'm not sure you can. You might be able to. I would say go to the site and find out. I mean, you can look online and see what is required to be exempt from yellow fever jab. I'm not sure what the requirements are, but I'm sure they have it on the website somewhere. So just go to travel.sl.gov, or is it? Yeah, I think it's travel.sl.gov, and you should be able to find any details you need around the requirements, and if in fact you are able to get an exemption form. So yeah, I think your question of where would I look was about what website. So travel.sl.gov is the site you'll go to, and you should be able to find it there. Just search around on the site around requirements for travel to Sierra Leone, and in there you'll see the requirements. And I'm sure if you click on the particular yellow fever, I'm sure there'll be like a drop down menu, or it'll open up to tell you what the requirements are and the potential for getting an exemption. I don't know exactly where to look on the site, but I know if you just do a simple Google search or look at travel.gov.sl, you'll find those details there. So yeah, that is what we got. Any other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? So the Real Exposure Show is asking if if yellow fever is something you should be concerned about. Look, yes, it's something you can be concerned about. Any country that requires you to to get the jab before you go for that particular thing, I would say it's something that is there. Most people have already been, uh, you know, jabbed for it, but it doesn't mean that you won't risk getting exposed to it. So there are many countries that require you for you even to enter their country, even if you've traveled from somewhere where you expect that it could be prevalent. Um, you have to take it. So like let's say you are doing a two-country trip and you're stopping in one country that doesn't have it as a prevalent number and you're stopping in another country that does, you will be required to take it if you're going to stay there for longer than 10 hours. That's what I've read on a couple of countries' websites when you are looking to enter their countries. All right. So the Real Exposure Show says, thanks for your help. You're welcome. I'm always happy to help. Guys, I want to thank you guys all for joining the live. We are just under an hour, but we went through a lot today. We answered a lot of questions. And like I said, if you like this content, hit that thumbs up. If you are not already subscribed, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're notified every time a new video comes out. And what I want you to do is share this with at least 2 people you know who are interested in investing in Sierra Leone. Just 2 people. So hit that share button. And you can copy the link or you can send it on WhatsApp or via text message to 2 people you know to let them know what they can expect in terms of the investments on the continent of Africa through the World Bank. And with that, guys, thanks for watching. I will see you all on the next video.